Welcome to Digitel Talk podcast, where we spotlight entrepreneurs and innovators leveraging technology related to telecoms to drive positive global impact. I am here with my co-host, Frankie Spagnolo, and our guest today is Joost de Kluijver, who is the Managing Director of Closing the Loop, who offer the technology industry a service that makes a positive impact on customers, communities, and the planet. The service is simple and easy to implement. For a new phone that is sold, we collect and recycle a broken one for one. This innovation enables the technology industry to continue its proud history of connecting global communities whilst growing more sustainably.
Today's episode is sponsored by IFG Consulting Europe, a leading business growth consultancy representing promising software providers selling to the telecoms, enterprise and mobile markets in Europe. Go to ifgconsultingeurope.com to find out more.
Hello, Frankie. How are you today?
Hi, Ian. I'm doing well today. I'm still reeling from the U.S. elections, but excited to focus on things that are good in the world. So it's one of the reasons I love this podcast, and I am excited about hearing about Closing Loop and their role in the circular economy, specifically as it relates to tech waste, which, as we know, e-waste is a massive part of what we see in landfills every year. So I'm very excited. And without further ado, why don't I go ahead and introduce our guest. Joost, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for inviting me. Great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you.
So, Joost, would you kindly say a bit more about who you are and what you're doing?
Definitely. Thanks for that. It's great to be on the show here to talk a little bit about Closing the Loop, a company I founded just around 12 years ago, and that tries to make the topic that I think increasingly is being discussed or is mentioned in events or in the media, the topic of circularity, or very simply perhaps waste reduction, to make that a little bit more not just relevant for the average customer, but I think also actionable for the industry. And not just because we should feel guilty or responsible about the problems we're all causing, because yes, that might be a driver.
Although we should.
Yeah, indeed. It might be a driver here and there, and legislation is coming for those that are interested in that part. But I think also because this is the coolest industry in the planet, right? We've changed society. We've connected countries to the 21st century, especially in developing parts of the world. Why not also apply all that innovation and that positivity and just the skills that we have as an industry to make things better, and apply that to the topic of waste reduction instead of leaving it to the compliance folks or legislators to work on. So my company indeed creates a very simple approach so that it can be actually done today. Not to say that using our service you're finished, but at least you can get started. And exactly to your point, Ian, it's called one for one, and now is being used by the industry in some 12 countries around the world, where they would add a device to the market. So they sell a device or they lease out a device, and then we remove the device from the market. And then the device that we collect is completely end of life. And that's the last part I'll mention. It's collected in places where waste is normally not collected. So these will be developing parts of the world, for example.
It's really fascinating. And you touched upon a couple of points, which I believe have been important to this heightened awareness around waste reduction, waste management. When you think about it like that, it's really unsexy, right? It takes you back to the idea of waste management, like the stereotype of the Italian mob in America or whatever, right? When I think about waste management. And one of the ways which branding can be so important for these major global issues that we all have to care about, circular economy, right? Who doesn't love a circle? It's the perfect thing. It feeds itself, economy, money. This is a new way for us to increase revenues or reuse pieces to decrease costs. I think the name, in addition to our awareness and the global climate crisis, has really done a lot for waste management. But you said 12 years. Is this a field you were always in? Was it tech? How did you end up specifically addressing this?
Yeah, thanks. And great to hear enthusiasm about the topic because it is beautiful, right?
Right.
I love to talk about it as well. So when we started, actually, I was working in developing countries myself. I was actually initially, so this is a long time ago, selling phones at the beginning of the century. So I feel connected to the telecom industry for a very long time already. But it was exactly
Oh, right, the
just
21st century, right?
yeah, we are in that century now. Yeah, I'm not. Some of my colleagues are real telecom dinosaurs, but I'm beginning to become one. But what I've seen, indeed, exactly to your point, right? It's all about customer centricity. It's all about innovation. It's all about beautiful storytelling. So definitely something I was very excited about, and especially when I started traveling for my work to places like Ghana, Nigeria, because actually prior to starting Closing Loop, I was selling mobile devices in these countries. And so I saw people in rural villages that didn't have television, that didn't have fixed line connectivity. They pretty much had nothing. But because of the introduction of a phone, which in some countries is still ongoing, right, in these parts of the world, they all of a sudden got connected to the rest of the planet. They were able to create jobs and livelihood for themselves. They were able to create rights to challenge their government. So it's such a cool product, and connectivity is so important for livelihoods that when I at some point saw that those devices, of course, like everywhere in the world, become end of life, but in these parts of the world, then it means they become problems, right? They become electronic waste, which is chemical and dangerous. I thought that can't be, right? It's all great. It's all positivity. It's all something to be proud of. And then they become end of life. And then we're like, no, this is not our responsibility. We're sorry, or someone else should fix it. And I think that clearly won't solve it. And then you get the situation that we have now where just a very small part of the phones that are being sold and our electronics are being collected. So we wanted to make it business smart, to make it engaging, to work on this, unfortunately, rather abstract topic. So that's how we got started.
And which was the country you started with, may I ask?
The first collections that we did, this was in several countries at the same time, but mostly in Ghana and Uganda, and those were really our pilot markets. And there's so much to tell about that, you can imagine, right? We work with the informal sector. We create jobs for them by paying them for end-of-life devices. This waste that they currently see as a problem, and it is some challenges there, it's actually turned into gold. So it's beautiful. But I think what we've learned mostly is if you just talk about that, and again, you can, it remains disconnected to what Verizon would work on or what Samsung works on a daily basis. Because what they do isn't waste reduction in Africa. What they do is making their customers happy. What they do is beating their competitors perhaps as well here and there by indeed showing how innovative and leading and cool they are.
Maybe the latter first and the first afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
They worry about their money, try to make their company customers happy.
Exactly. And I think it's a very healthy thing to do, right? A very logical thing. Everyone understands that's what companies are all about. So I think what we try to do is use that very logical thing. Everyone wants to make their customers happy and everyone wants to be the coolest brand in the world. So if we use those goals and then explain to them how they can use waste reduction to deliver on those goals, then I think we have not a golden, but a bit of a silver formula.
So at the point of buying, they're seeing the whole experience as a positive in the sense of, as you say, there is the aspect of the buying that they're also getting rid of maybe an old mobile or used mobile, but fundamentally at the point of buying, those people are going, great, I know that it's all good. It's all good that I'm doing, that I'm actually buying a new phone is a good thing.
It's the Tom's model, right? They made a shoe and they made themselves a luxury, low-cost item. Buy one, donate one. Every dollar you spend is worth two. And this is the inverse of that loyalty, consumer, planet, compassion strategy, in that buy one, return them. Your effort in taking is being countered on an individual level, like a carbon footprint by returning your old one. And if you think about it, and yes, I'm a technologist, but I have literally an entire steamer trunk full of old devices, for whatever. And it's not just because this is a question about circular economy and this beautiful storytelling, right? It's that when you get it back, what do you do with it? And when do companies like Verizon start working with companies like yours to be thinking about how that process in return and removal of component parts like gold and silver and cadmium, this consumption from our Earth's most precious resources that building tech requires, that loop, is that something that you are thinking about as well? Something that you do already in the reclamation of parts once you get something back?
Yeah, great question. And there's a yes and a no. Operationally, we do the whole thing, right? So we've set up collection networks. We make sure that the waste is properly handled, and we turn it into materials together with our partner that is in Italy, actually. A smelter is what they're called. And what they do is indeed turn electronic waste into metals. Your listeners will probably not be able to see, but you can just say, wow, if you see this piece of jewelry that is made from the metal extracted from our waste. So again, you can really show, cool, huh? You can really show
It's
the beauty
super cool
of electronic waste, right? It's not about taking responsibility and saying you're sorry. It's about how can you make it engaging and positive, and of course also commercially logical to act on it. And then you need to create value.
Right.
You shouldn't create guilty feelings. You should create value. And so that's our obsession, right? I don't want to talk to Verizon and say, you're selling phones. Did you know that you're causing a problem? Because I'll leave that to Greenpeace. I want to talk to Verizon and say, you're selling devices to millions of people. And all of those people, these, according to Boston Consulting, 74% of those people like the concept of waste reduction or green, right? But they just don't want to do anything for it because they're maybe a little bit lazy, perhaps. So what you need to do to tap into that big group is to make it extremely simple and do the work for them. And I think that's the commercial opportunity for a service provider to turn this concept of waste reduction into a service for customers.
I think that's so smart. I mean, beauty and simplicity, right? And really, technology is so beautiful. If you think about a microchip, if you took a microchip and had a professional photographer take pictures of it and blew it up in black and white, it could hang in the it could hang as waste microchips. And I've seen them used when people recycle, upcycle into big art installations. I mean, it is so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
Not only the capability of what these things inside allow to happen, but their actual physical form. And how much waste like this is there actually, and how much success are you having? Where are our wins at the moment?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think you're totally right. The topic that we work on is about materials extracted. It's about how many devices are sold and not collected, and the numbers are not really exciting, right? If not embarrassing, perhaps. We're looking at some 1.5 to 2 billion devices being sold. You can look at phones, and around 25% being collected. So there's an opportunity to do more. But I think, sorry, I'm repeating a little bit perhaps, but again, it's really our obsession to see how can we get people that are not yet interested in where their cold on is from, or how the recycling process works, because that's not a lot of people, right, that care about the materials in their products or the carbon footprint of their devices. There are a few. Luckily, the group is growing. Exactly. Yeah, but what about the rest? Should we wait till the rest is also on board? Or should we offer the rest something that they do appreciate? Because it is simple enough, because it is positive enough, and it doesn't require them to have in-depth analysis or a knowledge about the industry and the materials that it uses. We're now collecting millions of devices, and these countries where we're active, again, parts of Asia and Africa, that's unseen, these numbers. The collection just doesn't happen formally. So that's great, right? Those numbers are great. We get some applause here and there. But I think what I'm excited about is that companies like Vodafone, companies like Samsung use this service, and as a result get positive customer feedback. As a result, they win deals, right? For example, governments saying, I need electronics and I'll buy them. But could you make that sale a little bit more aligned with my sustainable goals? And then now you can use our service for that. So that's the proof that I think the industry needs more, because I don't want to convince sustainability people to do something on sustainability. I want to convince commercial people to do something on sustainability.
And how many of the operators are you engaged with, or operator groups? Because I'm thinking there are at least, is it 800 operators worldwide, the bigger ones? I think the number might be me and GSMA 3,000 are listed, but where are you with that engagement? Obviously, we as a podcast would be keen to people listening would be interested in engaging with you as well, right?
Yeah, we still accept incoming sales calls. That's totally fine, because it's really a relatively new concept, right? Vodafone came on board 2 years ago, and they were the first mover of size. T-Mobile is using it in Europe, I must say. We have OEMs of different sizes, because it's not just the carriers using this proposition. It's also leasing firms and ITAD, which is companies that take back used devices. All of them can use our service.
Like Brightstar.
Yeah, indeed. Those type of companies, they can use our service to just add to what they currently do. And sometimes they sell a device, sometimes they repair a device, sometimes they lease out the device. But adding one for one means they sweeten the deal for their customers. They make their proposition more special. And I think we're all looking to be special, and they're all looking to be better than the rest. So that's, I think, the proof that we're quite excited about. And it helps these brands to be better than their competitors.
And this is what I think the circular economy is so great, and why it's the business model moving forward in the way to think commercially is it's not just win, which previously was like, okay, who do I put first, the customer or my profit? And that was this flop. There's two wins. The customer has to win and I have to win. And how the company prioritized that certainly made a difference where I spent my dollars, right? And those conscious consumers have only gotten more. And what the circular economy does is it adds one more win, right? What's the third win? Is it for somebody who can't afford this? Does it have an impact on the planet that is moving us forward? That third win is really becoming vitally important. And that makes it the circular economy, right? That infinity of those three dots along that line of money, right?
Yeah.
And how things get made. So I love it.
Oh, thanks. And I think that's the beauty about circular thinking. And definitely if you compare that a bit to sustainability. Sustainability very much was about, let's fight the market, which is a great goal, perhaps, for those that want to be in that field. But I think it's much more logical, and actually more fun usually as well, to work with the market and see how can we use supply and demand to create the goals that we have. And then that's much more indeed what's in this circularity space, right? It's called circular economy, where we indeed...
It's really a sustainable model, right?
Exactly. We create more wins.
It's not just... see more wins. It's sustainable, right? At its level, because things have to get made. We have to use things. Companies need to make money, and consumers need service. It's not going to stop, but yeah.
Especially not as a first. I fully agree with the diehard activists and sustainability folks that doing something simple or pragmatic, like what we do, isn't the solution. But I don't think we need solutions, right? Because solutions are usually in 2030 or 40. We need to have action points. We need to have starting points. And you can't have a starting point that people say, that's too risky or not attractive to me. A starting point needs to be simple and attractive.
Right. It's the game of dominoes. We're never going to get... This answer isn't going to magically come that solves all the problems. We have to knock dominoes over that start a chain reaction down the line and can touch a lot of points, which, the mobile phone and e-waste and the management of those resources as they come from and go out into the world and get back to us, it has tremendous value to the commercial enterprises.
A question I'd like to ask, you were mentioning you started 12 years ago, but it's actually in fact, I think it's going to be 2025 that the large enterprises need to report officially on the ESG goals. So actually you were ahead of the game in the sense of you're part of their story and their reporting, I'm sure of that. But are you finding that they're also asking you for more information about what you're doing for them and the sort of one-to-one relationship? Are you seeing an uptake in and more demand in this area?
Yeah, so I'm Dutch, so I sometimes answer things a little bit too direct. Forgive me for that. And sometimes also perhaps a little bit too black and white. But I think overall ESG is a cost, right? And sometimes you can deliver on ESG in the most cost effective way and then get business that way. I prefer to be in the non-cost conversation and talk about why would you want to use this service? Not why do you have to? Because ESG is very often about compliance, being forced into doing this, or legislators or big customers are demanding this. Unfortunately, sometimes, yes, that's a driver. But I think the number of companies that use our service because of ESG, I think it's probably less than a handful. What helps me within that discussion is that people start thinking that, hey, maybe there is more than just doing business and making money. But on the short term, ESG is for one, so obsessed with carbon. And so, they're just so little looking at waste, let alone electronic waste, that you would see specific elements there that help us. But I think in majority, if you want to scale, you just really don't want to be in the ESG domain, right? The goal of ESG is to be compliant. So that's already, a goal that really doesn't attract me that much. But secondly, you want to do this at the lowest possible cost. So I hardly ever see people working on ESG, and usually these are the reporting folks that are looking for ways to spend more of the money because they don't have it most of the time. And also because that's just not their mandate. What I work with is the proposition developers. The people that I create synergy for is those that work on marketing, on sales, on customer engagement type of roles. Because what they need is stuff to show that they're the best in the market.
Who's the best in the market?
They need to prove that, right? The commercial people need to prove that.
Prove it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas the ESG people have a goal to say, okay, what's the legal requirement? Then let's do that, right? They don't want to do this, right? They'll be punished if they do that.
They won't do more than whatever the minimum requirement is.
I mean, there are definitely a few exceptions here and there, but ESG as a goal is to be compliant.
Can you just briefly talk us through the value chain? Because I say you're marketing led, if I understand it correctly, you're talking to the product managers, you're trying to sell a positive message, which they can then resell to their customers as part of the procurement or purchasing process. That's your key proposition. But I'd like to also understand the other side of this, if you can explain it. You also have to incentivize people to collect and the rest of it, and you're also trying to make money out of the back of it. So you can just talk through incentivizing other people in the value chain to play ball.
So there's, of course, two sides of our business. And actually also that's how our company is set up. So on the one hand, we work with the companies that produce or sell or manage devices, phones, laptops, tablets, etc., and then help them see how our service creates value for them. Again, indeed, in those several fields, sales, marketing, branding, etc., etc. But indeed, of course, the effect of our service is that we sell our service, right? So per device, we get a fee, and that fee is used to collect the same amount of electronic waste. So again, one for one, very simply says, I'll use the example of Vodafone. They sell a new phone, and they pay us a few euros per phone that they sell. And then we use that money to collect on their behalf a completely end-of-life device. So again, that's the very simple concept of one for one. And that means in practice that we collect that end-of-life device, which we do, as I mentioned, in countries like Ghana, Nigeria, places where waste is normally not collected. And the reason for that is there are several reasons, but one of them is, you can imagine that has a much bigger impact if you collect in Nigeria than if you collect it in Switzerland, right? That's one. But also, if you collect it in those countries, it's additional because that collection would otherwise not happen. And if it's additional, then you can use it for indeed actual counting and also marketing claims, which some of our customers do. This device is waste neutral and stuff like that. So the thing that actually where our magic is all about, and which I tried to do a little bit myself in the beginning, again, when I started the company 12 years ago, is the creation of waste collection programs in these countries where there is no formal collection. So you can't just ring a waste company and say, could you collect phones? This is the informal sector. So these are individuals that might have experience in collecting plastics. They might have experience in working with repair shops. And now we tell them, when you have devices that you cannot use anymore, that are completely end of life, you can imagine in a country like Ghana, when it is end of life, it has been repaired 6 times, it has 6 owners, it is
Done.
end of life, right? There's nothing you can do.
Right. It's not some American, you got a crack in the side of the use iPhone and going to turn in and buy the next one.
Indeed. It's not the nice color anymore. I'll buy a new one. No, that doesn't happen that much. So we work with the places where those devices would end up when they become end of life. And that's largely two. It's one, the repair shops, and they're everywhere, right? Repair happens really intensively in the emerging world, you can imagine. And they're really good at it and low cost, right? My colleague, when he goes there, he brings his phone to repair there because you pay 15 euros to repair a screen. If you do that in Europe, you pay 10 times that much, right? And it's done quite well. So that's great. But when they can't repair it anymore, then they have a carton box behind their desk. And it's really often a desk outside on this square somewhere where this guy or girl is repairing devices. And they will have a carton box filled with waste. And so what usually happens is then at some point that carton box is full and they would throw it in the dump, right? Yeah, I'm making it overly simple, but that's unfortunately how electronic waste management is in most of these countries. So what changes now is that we buy that waste.
I want to link it right back because, again, we say waste, we say dump, we say end of life, but yet you got it back. And the beauty of electronic waste is that you pulled out heavy metals to make a seriously fine metal bracelet that fits around your wrist, right? Like how many, let's get tangible 1-to-1, how many phones equal your bracelet?
I think if I'm correct, it's 20. So this is a spin-off of ours. They produce indeed jewelry. They're called NOAA, so short for no waste. And what they do is indeed use our metals, again, just to show the beauty of electronic waste instead of the problem, and make necklaces and rings and stuff like that. Quite a unique company, again, I must say. So that's cool stuff.
But it's not the metal in weight, it's metal in beauty. So again, it's another whole level of value that you're creating here.
It's cool because you're creating a luxury good out of waste, out of end of life, out of dump. A luxury good is being produced, right? And the more rare that becomes, what a wonderful thing.
Well, thanks. And I think we need that creativity.
What about other countries then? You said 12 countries. Do you have an ambition? I think there's about 200 countries in the world as far as the UN is concerned. So you've still got 180 plus to go because basically the problem's everywhere as far as I understand.
Yeah, so that's really indeed the dual side again of our approach, right? So on the one hand, we serve customers with our one-for-one proposition, and that's what we do now in 12 countries. So the US, bigger countries in Europe, but also now Japan and Australia, their one-for-one is being used. So some company along the value chain of devices is adding our proposition, our service to their proposition, and saying, look, we're leading in our field by indeed creating a new type of a closed loop. So that's the 12 countries. But as I mentioned, one-for-one leads to, of course, electronic waste being collected, which is our operational side. And that's what we currently do mostly in 4 countries, because we only do that in the developing countries around the world. So this would be, for example, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda. So that's definitely, we can increase that. But we're not so much looking for just increase of waste collection. You can collect waste easily. And then I upset my colleagues a little bit because it's of course not that easy, but you could collect waste. What we want to show is that there's a business reason to do it, that it makes business sense to work on circularity instead of that you work on it because you feel guilty enough or that there's a big of a problem.
But you're also these smelters. It means in those 4 countries, you've got a smelting operation as well, if I understood correctly.
No, we're working on the first. The bizarre situation is that around 150 million phones are being sold in Africa. Just looking at that perspective. And there is 0 recycling capacity in the whole of the African continent. So the really interesting part, although then it becomes like almost technical for those that are enthusiasts about that, is that we're the only company in the world that has shipped electronic waste out of Africa, now from 7 countries, because you cannot recycle it anywhere there.
I was thinking about the shipping and then actually these small batch artisan crafts like jewelry or baskets or textiles, which come out of Africa and a lot of these countries. Like you could have a You could have a 3-body problem. You could have the original loop, the solution loop, and the third loop to create the next economy of what comes out it, and that creating sustainable community income from that process right there in Africa. Because I was thinking, how do you get e-waste out of Africa? Where do we put it? Why have to ship it out of there if you can? And yes, there's going to be parts you do have to ship after the extraction of all the precious metals or heavy metals or whatever can be reused and upcycled into that. But what a cool thing. It's so important, guys. We're filling up our world with chargers and cheap headsets currently.
Yeah. No, and that's the interesting part for us now as well. We're doing this on a relatively nice scale now for phones, but we've actually also proven that it works for monitors. We did that for Philips monitors. And we're currently engaging with an electronic music brand to make them waste neutral, as they indeed like to call it. This is being discussed by headset producers. We're showing that, again, the concept works. We've proven that for phones, but it can work for a lot of other electronics. We work also with researchers and NGOs on that. So that indeed, hopefully this is scaled beyond our company. And again, you use it as part of a way to solve the electronic waste challenge.
Congratulations on that. Great.
Wonderful.
Joost, what future plans have you got for your project and your company?
I think there's really two sides to that. On the one hand, we're really excited to see telecom industry, as I mentioned earlier, looking at this concept of waste reduction or circularity, how I want to frame it, and get excited. So using it for ways to make their customers even more happy that they've chosen that brand. So we're very keen on scaling that, working with the OEMs, the carriers, but also, again, as I mentioned, an organization along the value chain, including the leasing firms and insurance companies, for example, just showing that adding circularity is good for business. And next, of course, that it's good for a positive impact in society, if you will. So I'm working hard on that, visiting the US here and there, traveling to parts of Asia. And of course, Europe is still a huge market for us on the one hand. And I think secondly, we're keen to make sure that what we're doing in the developing parts of the world, for example, Africa, isn't just a waste collection. We're working with governments to explain that indeed it makes sense for them and their economies to take this topic on. We're working with the NGO community, as I mentioned, to maybe consider not just battling the tech industry, but collaborating with them as we, I think, can create win-wins. But a more tangible one is that I mentioned earlier, we're currently shipping electronic waste out of Africa, just simply because you have to. You can't do anything smart about it locally. But we want to change that by building the first smelter, so a facility that turns that waste into metals locally. So that will be a big project. I think a really interesting one to show, again, that Africa can leapfrog towards circularity. And we've now just finalized the feasibility study for that. So it's looking quite promising that will actually happen, the first smelter in Africa.
How many are we currently at Closing the Loop?
We're a very small organization in the head office, so we're around 15 people in our Amsterdam office. But of course, the actual collection is done by our supply chain, which I mentioned is the informal industry. So you can't do headcounts in the way that I think we're used to. But it's around 2,000 to 3,000 people in our supply chain in those countries where we work.
Which brings us to a very nice segue of, is there someone or a group of people you want to give a shout out to? Because we also want to use this as a positive discussion. And no doubt there are people who've helped you on your way and you just think are doing great stuff. So it could either be related to your business, but it could be also something else.
Sure. Personally, maybe not so much a shout out, but definitely something to recognize is that I got supported by both the companies that I work with, the nonprofits that I've been engaged with, and they allowed me at least to experiment on the concept I'm currently now doing full time. But at the time was, let's say, a bit of an oddity, social entrepreneurship. And definitely my business partners that I started working with 15 years ago, initially with a different company that really helped me along the journey towards social entrepreneurship within the tech community. So that was valuable for me. For my business, it's really all about our customers who have taken a leap of faith because what we're doing is still new. It's a concept, circularity, that is still relatively unknown. And we work in emerging markets. A lot of companies would say maybe next time. But we saw companies like Vodafone, most recently West Coast distributors in the UK, seeing that this is something that they can really use and of course also collaborate on with us to create those synergies that we're all looking for. So definitely very much appreciative to their acceptance of our, let's say, creativity, but also the willingness to take more of a risk than just doing business as usual.
And it does take that. People within organizations making that, and it used to be a huge leap. What has happened with social conscious consumer pressures and regulations and the reality that we're facing is that gap has gotten less, but still this individual altruism, accountability, and effort has to be taken in order to make this happen. It's very true.
We need creativity, we need innovation, and we definitely need personal drive as well. And it's there, right, in the industry. But just you need to sometimes take a little bit of a different perspective than you initially think to get people to also look at what we do as something that brings the value to them personally and to their company.
Wonderful.
So behind every business idea, there's an interesting person as well who got there. So if we move on to the second part of our podcast, do you want to, Frankie, lead in on that?
Sure. So here on Digitel Talk, we are looking at companies that are doing good, but obviously, as we were talking about at the end of segment 1, individual people who want to drive this, and certainly 12 years of closing the loop means you're a pioneer in thinking about how the production of technology impacts the planet and what we're going to do about it. And so we'd like to hear a little bit more about you and what drives you and how the individuals that are spearheading both social entrepreneurship and work within NGOs using tech for good sort of came to be the person that they are today in wanting to do this. Because what we're definitely finding, and what was our hypothesis from the beginning, is that these are going to be a unique set of individuals. So do you have a philosophy of life that's driven you to this point or help mold you as an individual?
It really it helps to have an upbringing, a way of being educated by parents where the very logical thing to do was not to waste energy or food or water, not because there was scarcity. I was brought up in one of the most wealthiest countries in the world, in the Netherlands, but because it just doesn't make sense, right? Why would you use more? And you have to. And I think that has remained a question that I have myself, but also too, I can imagine a point that people would get a little bit annoyed also to people around me in my business life. It's just not something I'm familiar with to focus on materialistic or to get excited about a new car or a new watch or to look at the stuff that you have as something that's yours to spoil or to spill. So that helped. But I was also lucky enough indeed to work in, as I mentioned, the two extremes that our economic system has to offer, right? Pure profit for an international consulting firm, and then the other side of the economic spectrum, pure impact at the non-profit international NGO. And I was just surprised why those two organizations are all part of the same community. It's the same type of humans working in them, but
so far away.
Exactly. And
so disconnected.
Exactly. And maybe even sometimes distrusting of the other. And they might have reasons, but I think we're missing the goal that actually links us. And I won't sing any Kambuya, my Lord kind of songs here, but it does make sense that we are working on very basic stuff such as making ourselves useful, making ourselves proud of what we do, having a positive impact. And that's for some means indeed a lot of money, and for the other something else. But it is not that different, right? But I think what is different is how can we convince others of what we do is the right thing, or at least be understanding of what the others do. And what lesson was that I brought with me is that if I understand a little bit better from an impact perspective, what a commercial person does, that can help me a lot as an impact person. But as a commercial person,
Certainly.
to understand what impact is, and let's be honest, on the long-term impact is big, and that can be quite helpful as well. They're not conflicting worlds if you just take a little bit of a more open perspective. But that's my, maybe again, a bit of a hippie perspective, but it helped me a lot.
So what is your passion?
I think I'm a little bit of a person that also likes to make things difficult for myself, right? I'm not that excited about doing business in the Netherlands in itself because it's also predictable. So I like to work on things that normally wouldn't happen. For one, because then I'm quite almost sure that I'll be one of the best in it because no one else is doing it. I'm not very effective in optimized ecosystems like corporates. I just really fail miserably in those because I just can't really perform in a pre-structured way. I unfortunately have a bit of a dysfunctional mind on that perspective. I like to take different approaches, and in the corporate
diversity of thinking, neurodiversity of thinking.
Yeah,
I know it well.
Yeah.
On that point, though, I think you're unique, and that's a big positive. And your way of thinking we need, because following each other as sheep it doesn't really get us very far. So that's great. And do you think you picked that up in your upbringing, your childhood as a teenager or anything? Did you know what you wanted to be then? Any stories there?
Actually, my parents, one was an entrepreneur, so that's always helpful, right, to look at things differently. And my mother worked in a hospital, so the more social element to working life was logical for me. But initially, I didn't want to work. I remember a conversation with my father when I was 16 or so. What do you want to do? I think I'm working. It just doesn't make sense because everyone around me that I saw had indeed just a job that they felt they were obliged to do, and that they also already had planned out for such a long time. I thought, why would you work that way? So I was just so fortunate to find out that that's not what work has to be. It sometimes can be, of course, and sometimes, of course, need to do things that aren't just on the top of your bucket list, but it's very possible to do something that gives you energy, to work on something that you think is important while still doing something that's useful. And not everyone can be an artist, or not everyone can just create for the creativity side of it. But we also don't just have to get a career because a career is what society describes from us. So I was lucky enough to find that out. But initially I thought work, not for me.
That's amazing. And more of us probably think that at some point. And yet our brain doesn't even allow us to admit that's a possibility, right? But what's unique is your background in telecoms and like engineering, because you bring a very focused and hyper business sense and strategic sense to what you've done with closing the loop. So what is your background?
I'm good with numbers, so it was always clear that I had to do something around economics. So that's indeed what I studied in the end, business administration and business studies. Because I think, and that's something I also like to tell my colleagues, the best way to have, if you want to work on positive impact, the best way to do that is to use your skill, right? You don't want to work in waste collection if you're really good at math, unless when you create a business model, for example, of course. But
right.
Sometimes people think, if I want to do something positive, then it needs to be with my hands, even though I'm very good with numbers, for example. I think for me, it was clear I wanted to work on the commercial side, but indeed, I did find out very soon that truly the commercial side isn't about impact, or at least it wasn't exchanging.
And we're working towards that and trying. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
A lot of our guests have a real passion for what they're doing. And that's something that has been with them their whole life, is sustainability and the efforts to do things that are always been something that you've been passionate about? Or is there another passion of yours that perhaps our listeners would be surprised to hear about?
Definitely passion, I think helps. I would say I'm more of an obsession type of person. And I'm quite keen on, that sounds perhaps a little bit strange, but making things a little bit more difficult for myself than perhaps would normally be necessary.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, and you can really get a lot of that in this space, right? There's complexity. There is people just don't even want to talk to you simply because you are, referring to green or sustainable discussions. And that has definitely also been something I try to do in my career as well. I first worked in a pure commercial organization, but then found out that pure commercial thinking didn't work that well for me. Went to the total other extreme, worked for a diehard nonprofit, a UN spin-off, so you can't get more the opposite of commercial thinking that you see there. And I did it a few times after that as well in my life. I lived in quite different types of countries, first in Poland, then in Malaysia. So I like to experience different types of things in life. And this discussion, waste reduction, circularity within tech, it brings you to so many crazy, interesting places. It allows you to have so many interesting conversations, but it also requires you to be extremely flexible. I like that.
Certainly.
So would you say your passion in that sense is the challenge?
Definitely.
Of trying to do the unexpected or what people don't expect can be done?
Entrepreneurship is already, full of challenges. I like the element of also working in emerging markets quite a bit because the unpredictability is enormous, which is also probably the main reason why I don't find a lot of corporates there. But I think for me and my team, that's a main attractive element that attracts us to the region, to our countries in Africa where just things will not happen as you expect. And that's, of course, also challenging here and there, but it's also extremely fun to really work with our local teams, with our suppliers, if you will, those that collect the end-of-life devices in a country like Ghana or Nigeria, and just try to understand them. And that's, of course, for a guy that grew up in the Netherlands, it's difficult. I now have teams that have a background from Africa, so they understand.
That's
but
helpful.
At least trying is still something I like doing.
Yeah, understanding the cultural divide and getting to see the differences and then looking for the patterns where there are similarities, where you can affect efficiencies and scale because of those similarities cross borders. And you said something about entrepreneurship being challenging. I think in today's day and age, there is this idea that entrepreneurship is like this easy way to be able to have all your time and go with the flow. And really, the flow is a set of rapids rushing down a river, going straight towards a waterfall that's like 100-foot drop or something. What kind of advice would you give or legacy information would you want to pass on to a younger generation of entrepreneurs?
Personally, it doesn't really work for me to follow someone else's advice, right? You really always need to do something that works for you. And so that's why sometimes I'm a little bit surprised that people get so excited about a specific business opportunity, right? That you see all kinds of companies popping up in the same domain. Because I think for me, at least, entrepreneurship is all about doing something that is close to what I want to do, right? And not where I saw the business opportunity. Of course, it makes sense to also work on something where there is money to be made, but doing something that requires indeed changing your whole life, right? Spending all of your free time also on that topic. You definitely don't want to do that in a domain that you're just in because of the money. It needs to be something that resonates for you personally. And that's why for me, it just was an easy choice to work on something that combined making money because I love commercial thinking, but to combine that with doing something, let's say, positively impactful.
So do you have downtime at all? And if you do, what do you do when you're not working?
Well, I'm lucky enough to have just moved to Spain for a Dutch person.
You're lucky.
Yeah, for a Dutch person, this is heaven. All right. We did have some rain just now actually in Spain, but in the Netherlands, it's always raining. At least that's, I think, the saying that usually goes, and quite right. There's nature here. I'm close to the oceans. Here, it's paradise, right? I like to go for hikes or indeed spend time with my 3 kids at the beach or near the beach, just enjoying life that's a lot more close to, I think, the environment and to nature than that you can find in the Netherlands where everything is flat and everything is built on by cities. So different life. We're very much enjoying that. Yeah, congratulations.
So you have 3 kids, and how old are they? And what do you think will be the big thing in 10 years' time when they are hitting their stride of young adulthood, I'm imagining?
They're getting close to it already. Now, I have a 4-year-old 9-year-old and the 11, so at least the 11-year one is acting like he is getting close to maturity. But I think it's really satisfying as a parent to see that if you get them out of an environment, we were in a big city like Amsterdam, just not that much of an outdoor kind of life that you have here, that their perspective of what can you do in your free time just changes, right? I'm really happy to see that there luckily is an alternative to the digital world. The digital world, I think, is great. It gives us so many opportunities. The future will be all about tech, but your creativity will not come only from working with your devices. I'm hopeful that I think the future youth and maybe my kids when they are a few years older will experience the right balance, which I think the generation that grew up in the last 20 years didn't really find, right? The right balance between technology and real life. So I'm hopeful that we can support that.
And balance between consumption and replenishment, right? And this balance between digital and nature that you're talking about your kids finding, right? Even this balance that it's still missing seemingly in our governments today. I agree with you. I hope that's something we see in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
If that's the big thing, balance again, we're winning.
Yeah. And I think it can be supported also by, again, just getting kids to be in touch more with their surroundings, preferably natural surroundings, because it's just so easy to forget, where products are from. If you just look at your screen continuously and think, everything just magically appears. Whereas if you go outside, you experience that indeed nature is beautiful and grand, but it's also fragile and stuff can happen if you don't respect it, as we've done in a lot of parts of the world.
And certainly if our listeners and companies and corporations around the world, major handset manufacturers and other e-waste producers begin to participate in the efforts of companies like Closing the Loop, of which you are a leader and really doing some incredible things.
Thanks. And still enjoying ourselves.
Win, win, win.
So you mentioned that you've done quite a lot of traveling in your time. And one of the questions, which has been quite interesting, the answers we've received so far, is somewhere left an impact on you in relation to what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. My first job was already selling phones. So I feel connected to this industry for a long time already, but I got really excited and I would say also quite proud when I was traveling in emerging markets, in especially African countries, because there you see that countries like Uganda or Tanzania, they turned from, let's say, 19th century type of countries to 21st century type of countries because of mobile technology. And I was working in a rural village in Tanzania in 2010. You saw that people didn't have electricity. They didn't have any type of connectivity, but they had the mobile phones, which were only simple phones at the time, of course. They had maybe some solar power, but actually the majority, they didn't have that either. So what they did, they had these simple devices, and then a guy or a person would go to the bigger city once a week. He would collect all the batteries from the village, from all the phones, and then they would be charged in the city. They would come back, and then everyone would be connected again for a few days. And then,
but he loves the battery, man.
Yeah, that's a good job for that, right?
That's a business in itself. Yeah,
and because of that connectivity, right, people had additional income. Right? They had a motorcycle, and then all of a sudden they became a taxi driver. They could predict the weather forecasts. If they were farmers, you saw how extremely valuable mobile technology is. And we have definitely in developed parts of the world not appreciated that enough and understood the impact of these devices on these type of communities. So that's something to be really proud of.
Very good.
Yeah. Amazing. And it's true. And right alongside balance goes that appreciation. And that is part of something that truly is, like you said, about advice. It's really hard to take advice from other people. You have to experience or find your path. It's the same sort of thing on appreciation. If you don't understand how much you have, because you've never seen how little truly other people have, then it's really hard to appreciate at the scope, which is required to bridge those gaps. And it's really one of the things that I took away also from traveling into emerging markets that has been, I think, fundamental in my understanding of what's important as we move forward. On that topic and thinking into the future, we do try to imagine a little bit if you had a science fiction technology or capability, something that we saw in books or movies or read in books when you were growing up that you wished had actually come to fruition or would hope actually comes to fruition in the future. Is there something that jumps out?
I have a few people around me that work in 3D printing, and not just for construction, but actually the more advanced stuff. So what can you do if you expand the limits of a printer? I think that would be quite cool, right? And making everything available instantly around the world. So I'm rooting for that one.
Okay. And our final question is, are you Apple or are you Android?
I've always been Android for sometimes hippie reasons, because I've always thought that you get too much locked in by Apple devices. And I always thought that Apple was making too much money and not doing too much for the environment, which are both quite stupid reasons to choose the device for. I'm just not a big fan of
conscious consumerism.
Yeah, exactly. But I must say I'm changing a little bit, because I'm talking to people in the industry, and I'm really, again, proud to see some of the OEMs doing much more than they have to. And I think Apple is becoming one of the examples there. Okay. Because it is difficult, right, for an OEM, even though we think they're huge and they can do anything to change this industry, because it's just such a big industry. Even if you're Apple, changing something is not done overnight. And maybe especially for them to do it will not be easy. But yeah, I'm still a little bit of an Android lover as well.
I think given that you're dealing with the whole industry, that was a good political answer, that.
And I think it was really insightful, because Apple really was one of the biggest infringers of e-waste in and around their charging cords, because they were different than everything else that was out there. And then they continued to change them. So anytime Apple went through a change with their charging cords, 60 million tons of trash in a weekend, the scope of that. So it's good that they are taking accountability, and it is hard because the supply chain, they don't even control all of it. Those of you listening, if you want to address e-waste in your community, in your country, within your company, Closing the Loop has solutions for you right now to get started. This is a major problem on our planet and something that we should all be concerned about as humans here and as global citizens. So Closing the Loop, if you haven't watched their short film, won awards at at the film festivals, it's really poignant. And so, Joost, thank you so much for joining us. Really, it's wonderful to speak to people like you and hear what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's been a great pleasure to have you on our podcast, Joost, with Closing the Loop and all your ambitions with the circular economy. Thanks for taking the time to listen to our new podcast. If you have any feedback or know of any stories to be told involving digital technology and telecoms doing good, then please do let us know via our email, getintouch@digiteltalk.com. Also, feel free to send us a message on LinkedIn. It'd be great to hear from you.
Before we go, if you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to support the podcast, then don't forget to give us a follow and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to leave us a review or share it with your colleagues, it really helps us on the channel. Thanks so much for being a part of our audience today, and hopefully you'll join us next time.
That's all we've got time for, so it's goodbye from me.
And that's goodbye from him.
Bye
for now.
now.